Kesari has over 20 years of experience of working with the Bureau of Indian Standards, the Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, and he currently works for the German Agency for International Cooperation, GIZ. Mr. Kesari has specializes in market access conditions, including the regulatory landscape, standards, technical regulations, and compliance procedures. That's quite a bit. You also listened while we just had the talk with Mr. Singh from Process. Any special things that you want to reflect on, or anything you heard that was, hey, that's interesting?
Yes, Martin. Actually, yes, a couple of things which is there something which also extends naturally to the area that we work in the area of technical regulation. So what Sairaj said about, basically, I would like to point out the gap between the technology and the policy. So that is one topic or one area that we also face when we work in the area of technical regulations. So in the terms of, for example, technology keeps on changing very fast. And if the standards and conformity assessment, so those kinds of things, certification, do they reflect the latest technology, which many companies would follow? Also, the companies are following different technologies. So should we focus more on technology independent standards, or we should look into performance standards? So these kinds of questions keep on coming to us also. So this is, I think, which is there. And second is also that what Sairaj said is about the intention of anything, because in our case also, technical regulations, people normally see it as a technical barrier to trade. Nobody sees the positive side of that. So in that sense, what happens is that, yes, people say that, yes, why these technical regulations are on increase in India, why as a company we have to comply to so many things. But the thing is that if we look behind that, the intention is good, but then we could always maybe improve or work further on the access to information for the companies, and especially the foreign companies, because once they are coming, so it might be a bit of challenge for them to understand the process and everything. And so I think what Sairaj said, I would agree with those 3 points, definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, what I wanted to ask also to you, because you work a lot with SMEs also, right? And Process, yeah, they're investing, of course, in startups that scale very well to very large companies. Can you say something about the way you or in your office support SMEs in India?
Yes, so basically, when I talk about all these technical issues that a company has to face, and when we see the small and medium enterprises, usually the companies, we work a lot with German companies which are coming in India. So they start with trading of the trade part is much more important, and rather the manufacturing usually is not there. So a lot of their products are imported to India, and suddenly with the technical regulation, they have to start thinking about how do we comply to all these requirements, where do we get the license from, where do we register. So these are very challenging questions for a small and medium enterprises. If we compare them with the bigger companies might have an internal resources to handle all these things, but they also, after some stage, they would have their own challenges. But the SMEs face very basic challenges: where to get the information, is our product covered or not. So what we are doing in our area, so we come from Global Project Quality Infrastructure, which is set up by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs to support all these industries. So what we are working is, we are working with the help of industry associations, because we are also directly trying to reach out to these small and medium enterprises. But it is always better to include in the process the industry associations and chambers. So in that case, what we do is, because they have the outreach to the small and medium enterprises, we also kind of collect the information, the challenges which are faced by individual companies, try to generalize it or to find out the common challenges faced by the industry, and then develop solutions for that. So in our process, the industry association, whether that is Indo-German Chamber of Commerce or VDMA, so the industry chambers which are working, and right also we work with a lot of Indian associations, for example, Confederation of Indian Industry and Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce. So then these becomes the kind of aggregator of all the challenges that are being by SMEs. And then even the solutions which are developed, that applies to different SMEs. So it works out well in that way. So this is how we try to help them.
And across all industries, or?
Yes, we work across different sectors, but then the focus comes into those sectors which are basically being regulated in India, because so we work mostly on the regulated sectors in India.
Yeah, and there's been a rise on all these technical regulations in India rather recently. Can you sketch a bit of the background of this? Why is this happening, or why is this happening now?
So maybe I can take you back around, if we can compare the situation around maybe 5 years back and now. How can we look at that? So then at that stage, there were only around 100 products which were regulated in India. At that, I'm talking about 2015 or something around that. And now the number of products which are regulated are more than 400. And alone in 2020, around more than 200 products have been notified to be regulated by Indian government. So this is a huge change. But then let's also look at why this change is happening. So in the last 5 years, there have been a lot of change at the strategic level as well as operative level with issues related to quality infrastructure. When I talk about quality infrastructure, it basically means standards, technical regulations, conformity assessment procedure, and all these things. So then the government started thinking strategically about how the all QI related issues can be addressed in India. And they started organizing national standards conclave every year. So these were the issues where they started thinking. And then because one more initiative of Make in India that you would have heard, that is where of Government of India, they have brought back the focus on manufacturing sector. And because if they have the focus on manufacturing sector and they are looking for different companies to set up here, so naturally they cannot ignore the issues around standards and certification, labs, and all those issues comes along with that. So these were the changes which was happening at the strategic level. And then another major thing then government brought in was the Bureau of Indian Standards Act. So they also started working on the policy level, what kind of acts need what changes. So one major change was the Bureau of Indian Standards Act. So that was revised in 2016. And that actually allowed a lot of flexibility in the system. Earlier, if I say, then the process usually, which I also saw that when I was working with Bureau of Indian Standards many years ago. So there was primarily one kind of license system which was there, and the officer used to visit the location of the premises of the factory, check all the process and everything, and then only the company could have a license from BIS. But now there are multiple procedures which are available, and even without a physical visit of the officer, the companies can get licensed. So then there is a lot of flexibility. So all these things have been happening, in my sense, most connected to the focus back on manufacturing, and as well as at the same time that the government wants to focus on safety and consumer safety, and those aspects are also important. So all these combines are because of which the technical regulations are on the rise in India.
Okay, that's good. That's good to good background there. If we're talking about these technical regulations, and as you're working for a German agency, you might be able to say something about the difference between the technical regulations in, let's say, European Union and in India. because I guess many European companies will say, but all my products already have all these certifications for the EU. Why do I need, or why do I need another certificate or for India?
Mm-hmm. So I will come back to a question that there is a basic difference in the approach of how products are regulated in EU or Germany and how their approach is there in India. So in EU, as we all know, that it is basically that the products have to meet the essential requirements. The intention is same on both the sides, but the procedure or the approach is different in the sense that they have to meet the essential requirements which have been specified in the regulation, and the technical solutions are just added as an standard voluntary standards which they can follow or not follow. In case if they follow, then they have the advantage of presumption of conformity. Whereas in India, what they have done is that basically in the regulations, the Indian standards are mentioned there directly. So any company who wants to meet the Indian regulations, then they have to follow the Indian standards. And at times it is also possible that all the Indian standards are not same as the international standards or European standards. They are different because at times it is also because of the difference in climatic regions or conditions and things like that. But also there may be other reasons because of which the national standards deviate from the international standard. Then the company will have to comply to the Indian standards if they want to import or produce domestically in India. So that becomes a challenge and a potential technical barrier to trade for companies.
Because would that also mean that companies have to change their whole product for the Indian market? Because otherwise it's not, they are not compliant?
At times, yes, it could also be possible because the companies will have to modify their manufacturing process recently for even up to, for example, recently in some case in automotive component, the issue of marking how the conformity mark, like what we know from CE mark, something similar to that, India has a standard mark. So where do they put it on the tire? So this was also one. So whether that is visible or not. So those kinds of issues keep on coming, and where we may not realize that, but the product manufacturing process also needs to be tweaked a bit in that case. So yes, it could happen like that also.
Yeah, so the impact is could be large for these new technical regulations on companies. Which sectors are mainly affected or are most regulated at this point?
If I talk about the recent products, I would say steel and steel products are regulated. In fact, it is still a number of new products are being added in the list. And then medical devices, electronic and IT products, toys, and a lot of other electrical equipment is also something which has been recently notified to be regulated. So I see a lot of these sectors. Chemicals is also another one. So these are primarily the sectors which have been recently regulated a lot. But I also in future, we look that in addition to these, machineries would also be regulated. So this is something which is being worked upon. So we see that it would come under regulations.
Yeah,
so machineries.
Okay, so and that will have, of course, a big impact because a lot of machines are imported in India from EU companies.
Yes.
I wonder also, so tests. Okay, the regulations might be different, but so test certificates from an internationally recognized testing lab. But so outside of India, are they acceptable in India, or how does this work?
Unfortunately, no. No, because then for all the regulations, it is also that the manufacturers will have to get the product tested in a lab which is recognized by the Indian government representative, which is the Bureau of Indian Standards. So they have to get. So this is one thing, but then a lot of foreign testing and certification testing institutes are already available in India, whether we talk of TUV Rhineland, TUV Sud, or TUV Nord. So they already have presence in India, and in fact, are their presence here can help the companies in getting their products tested. But then apart from these, there are n numbers of testing institutes which have been recognized by Indian government, which the manufacturers can use.
So do you have the feeling that it becomes a bit more streamlined internationally, like, or is India still, or is India faring its own, is going its own way, or how do you?
So I would not say this maybe 5 or 6 years before that, but then now there was also another development that the National Standards Conclave that I was talking about. So India has also formulated its first national strategy for standardization, Indian National Strategy for Standardization. So this is a government Ministry of Commerce and Industry which brought it out, and they have kind of outlined the goals in terms of all these issues. So what we find that the intention, as I said, it was good in the sense that one of the goals would be that the Indian standards can be harmonized to the international standards, to involve all the stakeholders in the standard formulation activity, and then how can we also work into. So from all these perspectives, we can see that there is always an intention, and that is how the direction next action plans are what are being developed is working into, is that India should not be looking at itself, but it is more of basically kind of looking globally what is happening and what is not happening. So the perspective is global, and it is also in line with the Make in India or the recent Atmanirbhar initiative, which is basically a self-reliant initiative of the government. So all these are aligned to something where we can basically see that it is looking global. So then it is obviously the systems which are all being followed would be kind of aligned to those things.
Okay, that's good news then.
Yeah.
Maybe a last question before we move on to dive deeper into the BIS
Sure.
with Mr. Dhruv Thakur. If the audience that is listening and they listen to you and they think like, hey, where can I find more information on technical regulations and the products, and maybe to find out if their products are also regulated or new regulation is coming, where can they go? What websites can they visit? Or
what I would recommend is that one is, of course, the website of Bureau of Indian Standards, where all the list and all the documents are given there. So that is bis.org. But then apart from that, there are also certain websites, of course, WTO notifications. They can also see where the Indian government puts the notification. The third is also the various ministries. We can, of course, share a list of where they should usually look. So because the regulations are brought out usually by different ministries in India, and they are notified there. So that is also something. One important would be the Department of DPIIT. It is known as basically the Department of Promotion for Internal Trade. So that is something that they should definitely see. And what I would also recommend is our website, which is gpqi.org, because all the news related and how it is going to impact the industry, we put it out in the form of news articles. Also, we have different publications, sectoral, for example, machinery and things like that, we have sectoral. But one that we have worked already is a quality infrastructure landscape study in India. So that is already freely available on our website, and which gives all the regulatory landscape, which are the products which are regulated, what is the standard process of BIS. So all the issues, I think a lot of questions would be answered from that publication.
Wonderful.
So I would highly recommend
that's something to download for people who are
yes, definitely
want to know more about this. Alok, thank you very much for your time and explanations.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you for sharing.